Hello and welcome to the Esty Show.
Today we'll be exploring the intersection of product management and product design with Toma Lulgjuraj. Who is Toma, you may ask? Toma is the design director at a European hospitality unicorn company called Mews, M-E-W-S, where he leads teams that create outstanding guest experiences. Toma is originally from Australia, which I'm sure you'll pick up on from the accent, where he studied law and business before he traveled to Europe and discovered design. Toma has brought his design expertise to tech companies across multiple continents and multiple industries, focusing on product and organizational strategy and design and excellence. His impressive career includes leading design for notable companies such as Booking.com and Bugaboo. I think most of you know Booking.com, and parents will definitely recognize Bugaboo, also known as the Rolls-Royce of strollers, selling for $1,300 a pop. Why are we discussing design? For many businesses, design forms part of the crucial trifecta alongside product and engineering. Some companies like Apple and Airbnb are very much design-led, while others treat design as an internal agency or an afterthought. Our discussion today will explore the importance and impact of design, quality, and clarity in product development. Who is this episode for? This episode is for product managers, designers, entrepreneurs, and anyone who's interested in understanding how design influences product development and user experience. Whether you're a seasoned professional or just starting your career in tech, you'll gain valuable insights into the role of design in creating successful products. Let's go over a few key design definitions. One is UX, user experience. And yes, it should be UE, but don't argue. User experience is how a user interacts with and experiences a product, system, or service. It encompasses a person's perception of utility, ease of use, and efficiency. The next one is UI, user interface, the point of contact between humans and computers. It includes all elements a user interacts with, such as a screen, sound, overall style, and responsiveness. What's the difference between UX and UI? In digital design, UI refers to the interactivity, look and feel of a product screen, or a web page, while the UX covers a user's overall experience with the product or website. So a practical example would be navigating how a person moves through a website and the journey they take, that's UX. How a button is designed, that's UI. Minimum viable product, MVP. We've covered this a lot before. That is the initial release of a new product or major feature, including only the minimum capabilities required to be a viable customer solution. This is often used to validate customer needs or to test them before developing a fully featured product. Okay, so how did we get to this podcast episode? A couple of weeks ago, Toma posted an image on LinkedIn that went viral. It depicted a design in 4 stages, from conception to production, showing how the actual product got progressively watered down to the point of being unrecognizable. I'm adding a link to the image in the show notes, and on YouTube, the image will be included as well. This sparked a passionate and intense conversation typical of an excellent creative mind. Toma did not mince any words. I'm excited to bring you this conversation with Toma. Please remember, your feedback, ratings, and follows all help me grow. I absolutely love hearing from you, whether you agree, disagree, or want to discuss something entirely different altogether. Without further ado, let's get into it.
Toma, it's so exciting to have you on the show. Thank you for joining.
Oh, thanks for having me, Esther. It's lovely to be here, man.
Let's tell the audience about how we connected and over what we bonded. Also, you're the first designer to come on the show, which is crazy because design and product management are two brothers.
Should be best friends.
They should
be best friends, but they're not. And that's an interesting topic to delve into as to why. How did we end up here? I hacked my way to a LinkedIn post, which I very, very rarely do. And I put it out there, and I just put it out there because it was a point of truth and some frustration for me, and somehow it found its way to you.
Yeah, I'll tell you how it found its way to me. So Carla, my friend, who is a very good designer, who I'm very close with, and I've had designers who I've been very close with, and then designers who we fought with tooth and nail. But she sent me this post and we were laughing over it. We'll put this up on YouTube as well. But for the audience that's listening, let's describe a little bit of the post. The post has 4 stages. And I think you took an existing image, but you relabeled the 4 stages. So you see this building/garden, and the first image looks the most beautiful, and you labeled that as concept design. Then you see a more watered down version, and you labeled that after team meeting. Then the third image, it looks like a prison. All of the greenery, all of the garden pieces are stripped out. It's bare bones building. And you named that start of dev. And then the last image looks worse than a prison. A horrible looking building. And you're like, yep, and that's production. So I love it when you don't have to write 400 words and posts, and it's just one image that delivers a point so succinctly, and people who have been through this know exactly what you're talking about. The watering down of quality. I'm going to say one thing, but I'm sure you'll correct me and you'll go into other areas. But what Carla and I connected over this was when there are different people in the room and different decision makers, and everyone has different priorities. Someone has cost saving. Someone wants to deliver something quicker. Someone has a skills gap. In the end, you end up agreeing on the lowest common denominator, which is usually the worst product or a much worse product than originally was anticipated. And I'll just go in with the devil's advocate and then I'll give it to you, which the devil's advocate says, hey, you should start with wanting the world. And it's normal, but it's not realistic to produce such high quality or, we'd all love a car that can also fly and feed us at the same time. That being said, that's not realistic. We end up producing something that's more realistic.
Yep.
Okay. Very thought-provoking. Giving it over to you, Toma.
Surest path to mediocrity. What you just said. And I mean, you can talk about agendas and you can talk about values. And different agendas will usually also mean different values, right? But if your values are aligned in who you are, your purpose, what you're trying to achieve, then amazing things can and will happen. Not just can, but will happen. And that's how great things happen in life. I can't think of many things in life where people have just been butting heads over something not perfectly aligned and trying to achieve something together. It just doesn't work. Like, think of the sports team. It just doesn't work. You'll never win a championship that way.
Can you explain that? Why would a sports team not win a championship that way?
Okay, so if everyone's objective is to win a title, right? I'm a basketball fan, for example, and I love sports analogies because they perfectly encapsulate life and what we do. So if you have a team of players wanting to win a championship, and the surest way to win a championship is to play together and play in a way that is harmonious, and some of you have to give up your ego, some of you have to, do certain things maybe you're not perfectly comfortable doing, but it's a part of what you have to do to win, then your purpose and your values are aligned. And then by doing that, somewhat theoretically, but certainly also in practice, you will win. And you may or may not win a championship, but you will do better than you would have done had you not been aligned. And I think that is universally true. We see multiple examples in sport of people coming together. They take the best players they can find, the best players money can buy. They bring them together and they achieve nothing. Why is that?
So you're saying that the way for teamwork to work is not by having necessarily a lot of talented individuals in the room, but it is by having a singular goal and making sure that everyone's incentives align to that same goal at the end of the day. Ideally,
you will have both, but if I have to choose, I choose uniformity, I choose shared values, I choose a single purpose.
Have you read Patrick Lencioni, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team?
Never.
He talks about exactly what you're talking about. And he calls it the rowboat, the team that's all Harvard grads, but everyone's rowing in a different direction and they end up nowhere.
There you go.
A few different things that I want to ask you about. So Apple has a culture that's much more design-centric than I think any of the other large companies. In some companies that are extremely technical, or a lot of SaaS companies, design might not even exist, or it's there as an afterthought. It's really engineering and sales, and sometimes maybe product driving in the seat. I've seen organizations where design is viewed as an internal agency, where they don't have any agency, or they're not at the decision-making table, but instead they're given something and they're told, develop it to the best of your ability. And even crazier, I've seen cases where an engineer will sit there designing for the designer while the designer is pulling their hair out. So can you talk about number one, also maybe we take a step back and you give us some background on Muse and your own leadership experience. And then can we come to what does an organization benefit from when it has design thinkers at the table and at the forefront of the decision-making process?
Yep. Okay. The question is, what is design, right? And what does it stand for? What does it actually mean? And it's a somewhat abstract question. At some point, we enter a philosophical conversation here, and it's probably inevitable, but fundamentally, it's one man's opinion. And I'll give you my experience in a moment that would help you understand why I have this opinion, but it's quality, right? If something is well designed, what does that actually mean? It means that it is something of high quality, fundamentally. And what we have is we have a flow within any tech company. We're in tech, so let's keep it within tech. But you have a flow where products bring something that they believe the business needs that will deliver value to the customers and the business. And then it's design, and then it's development, fundamentally, right? In that process, design is usually wedged in the middle or at the start of the actual creative part of the process, and they stand for quality. And that's that little that little quadrant thing that I created that brought us together. That's what that's about. At the start of that creative process, you have something that is extremely high quality, and then that quality starts to dilute throughout the process. And you have to ask yourself why, because clearly it wasn't, and in most cases it's not unless you have an underperforming design team, but it wasn't design that resulted in that, because what design gave you was extremely high quality, at least should be, but something else happens in that process. And when I think about design, I think about quality. And when you and I hear conversations about, design should have a seat at the table, it's like, well, what does that actually mean?
Yeah.
Right? The only thing that actually matters in a business is quality. So it's not design that should have a seat at the table, it's quality that should have a seat at the table. We should all have that value. And in my experience, in most companies, that's an extremely hard thing to come by. So when you talk about Apple, you say Apple is design-centric. I say Apple is quality-centric, right? And it's something that it's a thread that runs through their entire business. If you look at obviously the design itself, industrial and software design, but if you look at the development, this is debatable, but development quality. And if you look at the marketing quality, which I think is indisputable, what do you see? What's the common thread? It's quality, right? High quality across the entire company.
I would also say simplicity, no?
Yes, and that's where we get
Okay.
into philosophical debate. But, is quality simplicity? Probably. But certainly quality, whether you want to call it simplicity or not. But Apple also have simplicity. That is in fact true. They truly get to the heart of something.
So why things water down? Because I gave you one example that I've seen why things water down, but another obvious one is budget. Other than people sitting at the table not wanting quality, because I'm sure if you asked any executive, hey, do you want quality? No one would say, no, I don't want quality. Let's break down that dilution from that ideal state of quality to actually what gets rolled out the door.
See, I would say it's not true. Obviously, if you ask someone that, it's a trap question, right? Do you want to be loved? Well, of course I want to be loved. Okay, but are you willing to do the things it takes to be loved? Well, think quality, right? So yes, I want quality. Okay, but do you want it more than your metric? Do you want it more than that promotion? In my experience, I've worked in agencies, I've worked in product companies. I was the strategy director for several years at an agency here in Amsterdam, and I've worked with many, many clients, and they all wanted quality, all of them, but they didn't want it more than whatever other ulterior motive brought them through that door, right? And it's a value, fundamentally.
Wouldn't you say there's something broken if the metric or the promotion is tied to diluting quality?
No. And the reason I say that is because it depends on the people and what they want. Look, this is where you get into philosophical arguments. So maybe you're fine with that. Maybe you're fine with delivering a metric, right? Maybe you're fine with just having the job done. Whatever we were tasked with doing, it got done, check box, we're done, right? A lot of people won't be. People like me, for example, won't be. And what it comes down to is the people that you have, the people you hire, and the values that they have. So we're coming back to values again. What do you value? And it's okay. It's okay if you value delivering a metric at the cost of excellence. It's okay if you're willing to have a life of mediocrity, for example, or create mediocre products. That's okay. The world is full of them. But you want to create a culture and you want to hire people and have people who value doing something really special and really great in life. Honestly, because what is the purpose of life if not to do something truly wonderful?
Let's talk about creative selection. We touched upon Apple. There's another conversation that I want to open about MVPs and testing based on what you're saying. But you spoke about how Apple prioritizes quality, and there's a book, Creative Selection, which has a very relevant example. Let's bring that example in.
Okay. Look, on the topic of MVPs, I feel like we have fallen into, as an industry, we've fallen into the trap of thinking in certain ways, right? When you throw around terms like MVP and then they try to reframe it as MLP, minimum level product, and the list goes on.
What I just hear is minimum.
What I hear is dogmatic bullshit, honestly.
Okay, keep going.
You spoke about simplicity a moment ago. In its simplest form, what are we doing, right? We're creating something. We're creating a product fundamentally. Now, you want to talk about moving metrics. How are you going to move metrics? By creating a product. You talk about hiring people. What are you hiring people to do? To create a product, right? You talk about making sales. Well, what are you selling? I'm selling a product. In the vast majority, I mean, some business worth services, but you and I are talking about products. If you remove the idea of an MVP and you just think about the thing, what is the thing that you're actually doing? I'm creating a product. Okay, now what is the quality of that thing? Is it good? Are you proud of it? Is it the best that it can be? That's it. In its simplest form, an MVP is a product in its simplest form. That in no way excuses low quality. Has nothing to do with it. You cannot say, well, it's an MVP, it's only an MVP. No, it's a product. You created a product. And in a minimum form, is that a good product or not? No? Then it's a shit product. That's it. I don't care. Don't call it, try and frame it as MVP and we'll come back to it later. You never do.
Right. Lenny Rachitsky, in his latest episode with one of the executives from Canva, they spoke about how they threw the concept of MVP out the window. And they said that wouldn't work for them because their customers needed products that they could actually use and love from the first moment. So if it was half-baked, they weren't cool with that. They didn't put that out. So that extended their timelines, but they decided to take a stake on that instead of embracing the fast testing culture.
Good on them.
Good on them, you're saying?
Yeah, good on them. Absolutely good on them. An MVP is an excuse to do shitty work. And that shouldn't be your culture. That shouldn't be your value.
What I've seen, and you've touched on this, but MVPs are sort of excuses to just move really fast. Yes, I agree. Produce shitty product. And I found two big issues with MVPs. Number one, the shitty product doesn't really represent the kind of interest that you'd see in the actual product because the product is shitty. So if you're doing it to gauge interest or to measure what the engagement will be when you build a real feature, very often the information that you get back, the data that you get back won't even be directionally correct. And the other thing is, in a culture where people are like, we could test this really fast. And this is something Marty Kagan has been pushing that I really disagree with. And he's like, you can deliver value in 2 weeks. We can deliver it tomorrow. When you're thinking that way, you don't have the discipline to sit and to say, to put out a high quality product, we need to invest the time in the discovery, in honing the quality, in developing it the way it needs to be developed. And you just keep on jumping from one shitty piece to another, and you end up with a hacked up product that looks like it's been hacked together with one-day releases.
Mm-hmm. I like you. This conversation here is exactly what I'm talking about when I talk about values. So it comes down to people fundamentally. So if I hire a type who believes that, right, as to be the PM in one of my teams, what I'm going to get is that sort of a cultural headbutting of sorts within the team. And then we're going to have these differing opinions and misalignment in values. And that's going to show itself in the product because it's people that make the product. So when we see a shitty product, there's something that went wrong in the machine, the people that made the product, right? And if I hired you, for example, with that perspective, you and I are going to have a conversation, our values are aligned. And what's going to come out the other end is most probably going to be a really nice product. It may not be perfect. It probably won't be perfect. But ideally, it will check the metrics for the business. It will actually satisfy the needs of the user. They will love it, ideally. We will have great pride in what we created. And it comes down to people and opinions. Right?
So let's talk about what are effective ways to test when you don't want to water down the quality and put out something half-baked.
What do you mean by test when you say test?
We're putting out, let's give an example of...
Let's say we want to create a product that helps people who are unemployed find work in their local area, right? Just helping neighbors. I don't know.
Awesome. Okay. So the goal is to help unemployed people find jobs locally.
Yep.
Now, let's say we do some discovery. We find out that, yes, if we take 5 regions, there are 3 million unemployed people. There's definitely a market for it. And we see that there are also jobs, but the jobs are in the restaurants, in the windows. So there's definitely value in consolidating that information in a digital platform that can deliver this to people. Now, in a test fast type of mentality, I could see a world where someone says, let's not even do any design. Let's just put out a Google form where people put down, hey, I want to clean and cook. And then we run around to businesses offering them that. That's sort of one version. What will that measure successfully? What will that not measure successfully? And then what would the other way, from your perspective, what would a successful way of designing that, testing that, until it gets to a place where we put out the highest quality product that resonates with both of the places of the marketplace essentially look like?
Yeah, you see, you're talking about two separate things there. One is validating that there is in fact a market for it, and we may have a possible solution for that. And another one is actually creating a product that people are actually going to use, right? And they're two different things.
Yeah.
If you're going to put something in people's hands and they're early adopters, if it's going to be an actual product and they're going to actually know that this is an early version, it is an idea, we're testing, we're validating on you, which we do all the time. We do it all the time with customers, but we're very, very explicit about what it is. And it's really clear and they know they're helping us. It's okay. I mean, you don't have to spend all day and night creating something beautiful and perfect and pixel perfect, right? So it's not necessary because the expectations are managed correctly. But if you're going to give something to somebody, and one way or another, they're paying for it. They're paying for it with money. They're paying for it with data. They're paying for it with eyeballs and advertising. One way or another, they're paying for it, right? And you're going to ask them to pay for this product and you're going to put shit in their hand. Well, that's a completely different conversation, right? Because at that point, but at the point you get to making the product, you've already validated and you know that what you're going to create probably solves the problem for them. Otherwise, you wouldn't invest in doing it. So if you're going to invest money in it, do it well.
So if you had a CEO who would listen to what you say, what would you advise in that situation? You validated that there's a need and you validated that there's supply. Now, how do we roll this out and what does this look like? And the CEO comes to you and says, Toma, how do we do this?
I mean, it depends is always the answer, right? Because I'm also acutely aware, especially from my time with the agency working with many, many high-level people, that there's a lot more to it than just a product. There's a whole go-to-market around it as well, right? And there's a lot of dynamics that they have to balance. But my advice would always be that you should aim for the highest quality you can. That value should always be there. And it may not always come out at every stage of a product creation process, but the value should always be there. And that's the bit that bothers me the most, when the value isn't there, right? I can totally understand. I mean, I've been doing this for almost 20 years, 18 years now. I can totally get it that it's not always going to be there, the quality not. But I cannot understand the value not being there. That's the bit that grinds me the most.
So how do you measure in an objective way? Is the value there or is the value not there?
You can't. There's no objective way to do it. And I mean, I've always equated it to love. You know, it's very hard to measure. It truly is. Quality is very, very hard to measure. But you know it when it's there. You can see it, you can feel it. And it's like, you know, one example. All right, talk about movie metrics, right? So one metric that I have for my life, one ambition that I have is to be married with 2 children, okay? And I achieved that. I have a wife, I have 2 kids, but sure enough, you know, my wife is, you know, maybe she's a bitch, maybe my kids are pretty fucked up. But hey, I achieved that metric, right? My next door neighbor, he achieved that metric too, but he's in a loving relationship, his family adores him, et cetera, right? So that's the quality. And that's the difference. So you can achieve that metric, but the quality is different.
This is the reason people don't place design executives at decision-making tables in, I'm going to say, stupid organizations, because they want numbers. They want to be able to check boxes. And if you tell them there is no number, you'll know it when you see it. The human nature element that can't live with ambiguity, that needs the framework, that needs the number, is going to jump out of their skin when they hear that as a response. And maybe that's just the way it is. And you hire talented people and you give them an environment where you let them do their thing.
So you've touched on something much deeper, which is that quality starts from the top. That value, and I think all values in the company really do start from the top. People like to believe they can go bottom up. They can't. I'm yet to see it. It's top down every day of the week. You have to hire the right executives with the right values. And that's how you ended up with an Apple, right? And to this day, I mean, their culture's getting diluted, that's for damn sure. And it has been for many years. But it's still there, the quality culture. And it happened because of Jobs. Because before him, what was happening in the 90s, right? He came back, it went top down. And it's continuous. Airbnb, top down. You look at all the companies that create really great products, even Microsoft with their you know, vast improvements over the last 7 or 8 years, Satya Nadella, top down. It happens top down.
So Steve Jobs, there's the movie, he's an iconic figure. Satya Nadella, do you have a few examples of what culture he's perpetuating from the top down?
He, as far as I'm aware, and I mean, it's been at least a couple of years since I read any sort of insightful, detailed articles on him. But as far as I'm aware, he really values just doing good work, giving people space and encouraging them to do really great work. Microsoft's design culture has been nurtured more than, I mean, believe me, they still have Microsoft-ish products, that's for sure. But I mean, teams give me headaches every day, but they've given their people more creative space than they had in the past. And fundamentally, what they've done, to the best of my understanding, I hope I'm not wrong with it, but is they have removed the extreme prioritization that they had on sales, which was Barmer, who coincidentally was a salesperson, and they have focused more on products and delivering value. That's not to say, of course, that's now their primary thing, but it's certainly been given more emphasis, and you can see it in what they're doing.
You know what they say about Microsoft Excel?
No.
The same thing that Churchill said about democracy. It's the worst system out there except for all the others.
I never heard that. I just heard it runs the world.
Well, yeah, because it's not a beautiful tool. It's a little bit meh, but it does everything. And it's just convenient enough and learnable enough and has enough use cases that no one else has been able to replace their...
Yeah, I'd never heard it. I mean, Apple tried to do what's their one called Numbers.
Oh, so bad.
Use a couple, exactly, but why is it so bad, right? And
why is it so bad?
yeah.
Maybe because, yeah.
It's not the Swiss Army knife that Excel is. More beautiful, yes, well done, congratulations, but it doesn't do the job that people are used to Excel doing, and that's the comparison, right? They compare it to Excel. Excel does this one doesn't. It looks better, but doesn't do it. So...
Tell me the story about the 2 design decisions at Apple, the one from Creative Selection.
Yeah, I read the book Creative Selection. It's written by a former developer from Apple, guy who designed, well, he worked on Safari, the browser, and he designed the first iPhone keyboard. He's one of the designers, but his design was the one that won out, and later the iPad keyboard. And he tells a story about there was a design being worked on at Apple, and basically what they wanted to do was, the designer came out with this beautiful, wonderful design for it, and then I don't think it was developers, I think it was marketing. But anyway, somebody in the company wanted to push back on it because they believed that it would, I think it was developers, they wanted to do a lighter version. It was faster, it was easier, and it would do the same job, right? And then they couldn't resolve the argument, so they took it to Eddie Q, who was one of the executives at Apple, and they put the 2 designs in front of him. One is the optimal design, and the other one is the one that would be faster, easier, cheaper to do. And Eddie Q took one look at him and went, "Oh, it's obvious you do that one." And he pointed to the better design, and it was just a perfect example of values in a company, right? And he didn't need to know, at least the book didn't detail that he did, but he didn't need to know how much money it would save them, how much time, blah, blah, blah. He just looked and went, "No, that's the better one. We do that one," right? And of course, he had the luxury of having billions of dollars behind him, where many companies don't. But nonetheless, the value was there. Again, it's about the value. The value was there. The desire was there.
You're saying once it's a value-driven decision, all the other components are secondary in nature. That how much ease or effort it's to push it out. If the value isn't there, we shouldn't even be having an effort conversation. That's ultimately the point you're making, right?
The value should always be top of mind, front and center. And there will absolutely always be cases, hopefully minimal cases, but there will be cases where you will have to compromise on that, and that's okay. But if you look for patterns, right? I always say where there are patterns, there are problems. And if you see a pattern of these sorts of decisions where they're compromising on quality for speed or for, to save money or just honestly, sometimes out of pure laziness, especially when it gets to development teams. If you see a pattern of that, then you have a serious problem. Whereas if it's very occasional, once in a while, and you can rationalize it, I think it's acceptable. I mean, I'm a realist. It's business, it's life. Sometimes it has to happen. If it happens all the time, then you really have a problem.
What's your advice to someone in a place where that pattern is present, where it's just one shortcut after the next, where the quality gets watered down to a point of non-recognition? Is your advice get out? Because you mentioned that the culture has to come top down. I wanted to ask you, and I agree with you, but why does bottom up not work?
I mean, it's like in society, right? We see politicians doing shit every day that they shouldn't be doing, and yet they get away with it continuously with no repercussions. And it's the same in business. It doesn't work because we don't have enough unity among people to actually force and push change. And especially in business, where it's not a democracy. Business is not a democracy.
Yeah.
Business is, you're getting paid, and they can easily, especially in America, they can easily out you. So it doesn't work. It doesn't work, and nor will it work. The only way to do it is top down. So if you are in that downward spiral, and it is a downward spiral, if you're in that downward spiral of habitually poor quality in what you do, maybe you're delivering the metrics, but the products are shit, then ultimately somebody needs to be fired. And it's probably somebody at the top.
But that person won't get fired, so it's probably going to be you.
That's the catch. That's the catch.
So get your resume in order and look for
but
yeah.
this also goes into the other thing, right? Is how many people are using the product, right? When you look at executives, you look at even directors, people at my level, far too many don't even use the products that their teams are creating. They have no idea what they look like. They don't see the details of them. And you get to a board level, the likelihood of a board, I mean, unless you're in a consumer-facing product like in your fucking Airbnb or something, then they're probably using it because it's Airbnb. They can use it and they have an opinion on it. The vast majority of the time, they're not. And that's a really big problem in business, especially for us, because if they were using it, they would know it was shit and then they could do something and they would fire somebody, but they're not. So they don't know. And all they're looking at is the metrics and voila, here we go. So what we've done at Muse is we're in the process of creating what we call a demo culture, right? Where it is the obligation of directors, VPs, and even C-level, certainly within R&D, to actually see and use what's coming out and have it demonstrated to them. If they're not able to use it, at least have it demonstrated. Our CEO, we have a product right now that was announced last week at our conference publicly. We have a whole channel for internal feedback on that product. And the person leaving the most feedback is our CEO. And I'm not talking about like a comment. I'm talking about like full Loom videos. He's leaving full Loom videos where he goes through it and he's going, why when I click on this, that shouldn't be like that. Hotels, blah, blah, blah. And he's like leaving like 20-minute Loom videos, right? That's how it should be. Everyone should be using the product.
I was many times as a bottom-up PM. I started out as a feature factory PM, more than happy to deliver what I was asked. So the top-down, the messages were completely broken. Definitely not prioritizing quality. And I have specific quotes to bring to example. So for example, one, and this is different companies, different leaders. One leader saying in response to, hey, here's a big user problem that if we fix, we can improve the user experience tremendously and thereby improve retention. The response was, we need to focus not on value creation, but on runway extending initiatives. Extending the runway for what? Another company leader said, this is too slow. I want to be launching stuff and throwing them out every 2 weeks. Just so that we could be launching stuff. I don't even know where that comes from, like what metric you're trying to chase. But this is how leaders in real companies that are VC backed, raised millions of dollars, are talking.
Yep. That far out. I feel that story in my heart because I've been there as well. It probably doesn't make you feel better, but I've seen it. I've lived it. I think the real, like hearing that story, the real thing to me is like, what was it about you? What was it about you that made you do what you did that was so disagreeable to them, right? Ignore them in the story and focus on you.
I don't think it was special. I think it was the fact that I had conflicting goals. So goal number 1 was launch a feature. And then goal number 2 was improve this metric. And I was launching the features, but the metric wasn't improving. So I was stuck between a rock and a hard place. And then I started saying, okay, if I really need to improve the metric, then this isn't the feature we should be launching. Had my success metric been just launch the feature, I might have not even gone down that path.
What would have moved? I mean, they wanted you to move the metric. Launching the feature.
They said that.
They said that.
If they really meant that, then they wouldn't have said launch feature X, Y, and Z. Then they would have said figure out how to move the metric.
Right, which is actually what the job of a good PM is, to actually work out how to solve the problem.
Yeah.
Right. Then what's the point in having you? What are they actually hiring you for?
What I think they're thinking, I think they know how to move the metric. And that's their domain. And they decided it's feature X, Y, and Z. And if you're not launching the feature, but you're starting to tell them how to move the metric, then you're stepping into territory that isn't yours. That's not your job. So, we have fancy strategy departments for that.
Now we're connecting back to why I asked the question, what made you special in that story? And I'm going to answer it for you, at least from my perspective, right? Is that you actually cared about doing your job properly. You cared about actually delivering the value that you were hired to deliver. And you did what most PMs, in my experience, let's say all, I've worked with many good ones, work with many good ones right now, but majority of them are actually project managers, not product managers, right? Which is probably what they thought that you should be doing. Here's what we want you to do. Go manage the project, right? And that is a death spiral for anyone in your profession. Your job is to understand the market, understand the customer, understand the business, and make sure there's alignment between all of them, right? And deliver value that way. Your job is not to be in Atlassian products all day and making sure the team is delivering on time. That is the furthest thing from the value that a true PM should actually have. So you were trying to do the job of a product manager, They wanted you to job of a project manager. They hired the wrong person.
This got way too personal.
Oh, no, but it's a common story though. It's not, this is your story, but it's everyone's story. I mean, we live this every day. And honestly, for most of my career, I greatly disliked PMs. And the reason I greatly disliked PMs is I never worked with any real ones. And once I did work with some real ones, I started to love PMs. And now I'm very protective of PMs. And when I hear that story, I'm like I feel it in my heart. It's very sentimental because it's frustrating me. It frustrates me the same way, designers not being valued frustrates me because like we're hiring great people. They're trying to do a great job. You were trying to do the exact thing that you were supposed to be doing, and it wasn't what they wanted. I mean, it's like, what kind of business are you actually running then? If it's just a feature factory, just outsource somewhere to Asia and leave it at that.
So what is the secret between a strong design product partnership? And I won't even say strong, I'll say the right product design partnership.
Mm-hmm. I think there are two things. The first one is making sure that you deliver the value that each of you delivers can compound. And I'll explain that in a moment. And the other one is, again, shared values. So, and those are two different value and values. We use, at least in one of my teams, we use what's called Shape Up, right? So we're not using Scrum. We're not using your traditional kind of Kanban style. We're using Shape Up, which came out of Basecamp. Now, what it is that we have a 6-week shaping cycle where, at least at the very front of that cycle, PMs and designers are working together to actually work out all of the details of what we're going to work on next. So our PMs, who are true PMs, will actually, then product managers, will actually come with insights and ideas around what we should be working on next, right? With the designers, they will come together, they'll discuss those, and they will have a process to actually ideate and validate the ideas that they have, right? So when we actually get into the development cycle at the end of this, 6 week plus 2 week break, when we get into the development cycle, all of the good work has already been done. So we can just build, we don't have to think about it. The harmony that happens in that shaping cycle is all about them actually having shared insights and shared understanding and shared values. They really care about what we're going to be creating. And because what they're doing actually needs to be pitched to us as directors, they have a common goal as well, which is to do the best shaping and do the kind of the best groundwork that they can do to give what they're working on the best chance of success to actually go to development stage. So it's actually a very harmonious alignment when they're both doing the job they're supposed to do, right? And they have shared values and shared purpose.
Very powerful. On the flip side, what should product managers not do to go on design's nerves and to completely erode the harmonious process?
I'm going to stick to what they actually should be doing, the best way to work with designers, right? Which is to actually care about the design. That's it. Just care about the design. If you're going to spend your time talking to designers about your priorities on moving metrics or just getting it out the door and these sorts of cliches, then you will not have them on your side and you will not have harmony. If you actually talk through the design with them and actually show that you care and understand, then they will be your best friend and they will help you achieve whatever you want to achieve. They truly will. And you know what? I've been in calls with PMs many times, especially in Muse, we have some really great ones, where we'll spend an hour talking through a design and the PM contributes as much as the designer. And you leave that call with a phenomenal amount of respect for that person, phenomenal amount of respect, right? And we will do whatever you need. Like we will be your best friend if you care about the design, the quality of the design. That's all it takes.
One more question and then we'll go into lightning round. Amazon.com, the app.
Yep.
I don't think it's beautiful, but it's an app that's really easy to use and I use it all the time. I spend a ton of money on it, probably more than anything else. From your point of view, and given the whole context of the quality conversation we've had and delivering value, how do you evaluate and look at that?
It's still quality, but it's a different kind of quality. The quality that they're focused towards, they're focused on speed. They're focused on actually showing you the content that is probably best suited to you. And they focus on something outside of the actual digital product, which is outstanding customer service, right? That is their quality. And they achieve that extremely well. So they're not focused on aesthetic quality, right? But their product is, at least within the relevant funnels, very usable, right? The experience that you have on there, you talk about user experience, forget about, the aesthetics and the emotional elements of it. Those are areas for improvement. They don't care about those and they should, but they don't. But their product is still quality. And that's my argument there. I hate it. I look at it aesthetically, I hate it, but it's still quality. And it does what I need it to do better than anybody else. And that makes me love it. I just know it can be better. And so do they. They also have a business model around it as well now, around, the way that they optimize and the way they run experiments. And it's like booking.com, where I also worked. It's in conflict with the idea of actually making something aesthetically pleasing, because you're going to make it beautiful and you're going to run experiments around that. They're probably not going to test positive, and then that's considered kind of a wasted investment, because it should all be about conversions. So
I love booking.com as well. Can you talk to the specific example there or the conflict?
You love Booking?
Yeah, I used it. I used it more than Airbnb, actually.
Okay. Booking, I spent 2 years there, and I still have roots in there as well. And they are all about optimization, right? And if you throw shit at a wall, some of it will stick. So run as many experiments as you can. Famously, 1,000 plus running at any given moment. Run as many experiments as you can. And statistically, a certain percentage of those, I think it was 1 in 10, the time that I was where, I think it was 1 in 10, will test positive for converting, right? So just throw as many out there as you can and you'll see an ROI. And that's the business model. And if you're going to invest time in little design changes and making that button look prettier and it doesn't test positive for conversion, that's considered a wasted experiment, because you could have been running one that might test positive conversion. And that's how you end up with a product that, you may like the value it delivers. I think it's brutally ugly. I hate many elements of it. Like, for example, right? You're an avid user, so you'll probably know this example. When you run a search, say you run a search and you open the map and you have your little filters on the left there, there's one that says only show available properties. So I'm looking at a map and I see all these properties on there, and half of them are unavailable. Why are you showing me those? Why?
Default to available.
Default to available, but they don't do it. Why?
Why? Because it makes it look more sparse?
No, my best guess is because it hasn't tested positive for conversion. And I might be wrong. I don't have the insider info on that one. I don't know. But if I was a betting man, I would bet that it hasn't tested positive conversion, so they haven't been able to actually make that the default.
Right.
Yeah.
You want a person at booking.com making the decision, like at Apple, this is the better design.
Yes.
Even if it
Absolutely.
doesn't perform well
Because
in some experiment.
They're human and they have eyes, and they know that it's shit to do that. It's a shit experience. So why aren't you fixing it, right? And it's been like that since I was there in 2015. Why haven't they fixed it? And again, I'm speculating, but that's how it worked when I was there. We couldn't put anything, nothing would go live unless it tested positive conversion. And then they eased off and they had kind of, it can be also neutral. And that was like after I left in 2017. So it was like, it can also be neutral, right? We can put some of those live. But their culture was positive conversion or nothing. And that made good design impossible.
Wow. Round of lightning questions. In the product management world, Lenny's podcast is like the product podcast. Is there an equivalent in the design world? And if not, what's your go-to for inspiration, for learning?
I truly have no idea. I used to be into that. I used to read all the articles and I'd be on the blogs and stuff. And it's been quite some years. I focus more on actually doing the work and learning that way, learning from people around me. I get sent links, like people, what's his name? Not Joe Gebbia, the other guy from Airbnb, the founder. I'm drawing him into Anyway, him. When he was on Lenny's podcast, that was sent to me. And, there was one about research. I get sent the podcast. I'll listen to them, because if you send it to me, then it's high value. They always find their way to you. And they're excellent. But I don't have time to go listening to a whole bunch. And
that podcast actually was very controversial with Airbnb, because he was talking about how they eliminated all of middle management.
Yep.
And every person, no matter what role in the company, had to be touching the product themselves.
Yeah, okay, there you go. That's what we were talking about a moment ago. And you know what? He's an absolute legend. Good on him. And that's exactly how it should be. And I'll tell you why.
Brian Chesky is his name.
That's
Brian
the one. Thank you. And I actually know that, but mental blank. We and I also count myself as middle management, are relatively useless in the grand scheme of things, right? And anytime a company is going broke, who's the first people you fire? It's usually middle management. And there's a reason for that. And somewhere in there, HR as well. But we're relatively useless. Our actual value is mostly bureaucratic. Bureaucracy is shit anyway. The real people doing the real work are the ones that are actually creators. And, if you're going to run a company, the last people you fire are the devs. And ideally you keep, devs, designers, creators, people who actually create. Because again, it goes back to what I said earlier, it's the product that sells. We exist for the product. Without the product, we can all go home. Every single one of us. We have no business here, right? We're there for the product.
If you could meet anyone dead or alive, who would it be?
Yeah, Steve Jobs.
Okay. What would you ask him?
I would ask him many things. One of which would be, how much did all of that LSD have to do with his current mindset? Does he believe that, does he still have any spiritual inclination? Because I think the most overlooked part of his life was the whole spiritual part of it. I remember watching a BBC, and this has always stuck with me, right? I remember watching a BBC documentary on him just after he died. Everyone was trying to cash in on it, so they made a documentary. And they had his baby mama on there, right? Lisa's mum on there. And they were like full hippie spiritual type when they were together. And I remember her, I believe with her anyway, it's like more than 10 years ago, saying that he failed in life. And it was just such a shocking statement, shocking thing to hear, right? Because you'd never think that. But what she was referring to, it's a matter of perspective, she was referring to spiritually, because he was so spiritually inclined, and then he gave it all up and he went straight into the kind of the worldly way of creating Apple and products, and he was so good at it. She considered him a failure. And I'm curious what his perspective on that would be as well, because he's like one of those dudes that could have been like a great spiritual master, but he chose a different path.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not a secret that his personal life was not nearly as successful as his professional life.
But it wasn't that, it was the spiritual part, right?
The
That's
spiritual
the bit no one
part.
talks about. That's what she was referring to. She wasn't talking about him and their love, right? She was talking about his spiritual path. He failed.
That he could be a
failed.
guru, or
He could have been truly transcendent spiritually, but he failed.
Interesting. Very interesting. If there's one message you could leave our audience with beyond the conversation we just had, what do you want people to walk away with?
I mean, I'm speaking to an audience of PMs mostly, right? It's in your job title, product, fight for the product, create a great product. It's the most important thing. Fuck the metrics, fuck everything else. Make a great product. That's why you exist. That's why we all exist. And I know you said outside of the podcast, we already said that, but it's the greatest point of emphasis. You are not a project manager. You're not a product owner. You're a product manager. Manage the product, make it great.
Toma, thank you so much.
Thank you.
If you've gotten this far, thank you for listening to another one of my episodes. Remember to follow The SD Show on whichever platform you use to listen to podcasts. If you have any feedback, questions, or just want to share your own experiences, don't be shy. Hit me up on LinkedIn or email. That's sd.podcast@gmail.com. I'm all ears. Until next time, stay curious, stay bold, and never stop learning.